Seems to be working better, huh? Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova to you all. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. Now is the time for turning on this Shabbat Shuvah. The leaves are beginning to turn from green to red to orange. And the birds are beginning to turn and are heading once more toward the south. The animals are beginning to turn to storing their food for the winter. For leaves, birds, and animals, turning comes instinctively. But for us, turning does not come so easily. It takes an act of will for us to turn, to make a turn. It means breaking with old habits. It means admitting that we've been wrong. And this is never easy. It means losing face. It means starting all over again. And this is always painful. It means saying I'm sorry. It means recognizing that we have the ability to change. These things are terribly hard to do. But unless we turn, we will be trapped forever in yesterday's ways. God, help us to turn from callousness to sensitivity, from hostility to love, from pettiness to purpose, from envy to contentment, from carelessness to discipline, from fear to faith. Turn us around and bring us back to you. Revive our lives as at the beginning, and turn us toward each other, for in isolation there is no life. We are not in isolation, even though our bodies may be stuck behind private doors. We are here in a new year, together, sensing one another's presence, joining together in this Shabbat Shuvah, this Shabbat of return. Let us sense, hear, feel our voices joined as one as we sing to return again, return again. Return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return to the land of your soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of your soul. Return to the land of your soul. So yes, Shana Tova makes perfect sense for us to be greeting each other with, wishing each other a good, sweet, healthy new year, a new year of learning, growing, becoming. But so too does Shabbat Shalom work just fine. This is that unique time where those two worlds join with one another in between the two holidays. So with one foot firmly planted in the freshness of a new year, experienced in beauty on Rosh Hashanah as hundreds and hundreds of us came together to greet the new year. The other foot planted with anticipation in what will join us together just 2 nights from now, Yom Kippur, as we do the deep, deep, deep self-work that will carry us into the new year with blessing, with the promise of new growth, of new hope, new us. So Shabbat is supposed to be a little different during these Aseret Yemei Shuvah, these 10 days of repentance, as we are deep inside the experience of the High Holy Days. Shabbat is a continuation of the self-work that we seek to do, but it's still the Sabbath. It's still supposed to be a pause for rest, renewal, restoration of body and spirit. It's also supposed to be a time where we experience unique beauty. Shabbat is beauty in our lives. And so let us, with our mind's eye, see the beauty of the bride, Shabbat arriving. We'll be singing the first 2 verses on page 20 in the online prayer book, and then the top and bottom pages, top and bottom verses on page 21. So that's verse 1, 2, 5, and 9. As we join together on pages 20 and 21, the online prayer book you can find at the Leobeck Temple website, leobecktemple.org/live. Bring you to our live stream page if you're not already there, and there you'll be able to click on a link for the online prayer book if you want to follow along with the words. Pages 20 and 21. Come, let us greet the bride.
that Shabbat ride, metaphorically, spiritually, and in our hearts. Oh, we Shabbat Shalom, Atem Bara, Gam Besimcha, we stay standing and we turn to the next page, page 28, for the Baruch Hu.
Holy is twilight, the realm of in-between. And so our sages taught, pray in the moments when light and darkness touch. We are all twilight people, beyond categories and labels. May the sacred in-between of this evening suspend our certainties. May it soften our judgments. May it widen our vision. Let it illumine our ways to the God who transcends all those boundaries and separations. Blessed are you, God of all, who brings on twilight. Blessed are you, God of all, who loves your people Israel. Shema is on page 34.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai לעולם ועד. You may be seated. We continue with the Ve'ahavta. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'ordecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha Veshinantam levanecha, D'var Torah bam, Veshivtecha bebetecha, Uvelachtecha v'derech, Ushochtecha uvekumecha, Ukshartam leot ayadecha, Vehayu letotafot beinenecha, Uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha, Uvisharecha leman tizkeru vasitem et kol mitzvotai vitem kedoshim leElohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti atrem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem leElohim Ani Adonai Elohechem.
In a moment, we'll be joining together and singing the Micha Mocha. You can find it in the online prayer book on page 40. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about Micha Mocha in the context of this unique moment in time as we are bidding farewell to arguably the most important Jewish voice in America. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away right at this very time a week ago. We won't be speaking her name at the time of Kaddish only because the custom is to make Kaddish for the very first time for someone at the time of their burial. And of course, her body is right now, it's been lying in repose at the Supreme Court and now in state at the Capitol, both honors that have never been afforded to any woman before. She's the first to experience those honors and to bring us to that greater level of honor for women in our country and in our world. A lot of us have been deflated by the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's at the time that we got the news, you could feel yourself shaking because it was just so hard to picture a world without her, because we've depended upon her for decades to have the secret formula for advancing us as a people, as a nation, to penetrate through all of the discord and disconnection and to inspire a greater sense of resolve that can connect people to do what had previously been impossible. And so we felt deflated. My gosh, how will we ever be able to proceed forward without her? She left us a compass for doing that, and that compass makes an awful lot of sense when we think about the Micha Mocha and where it comes from in our people's tradition. That is to say, from the story of Shirat Hayam, the story of our people as they witnessed the great miracle of the sea. Ruth Bader Ginsburg famously taught that you are to fight for the things that you care about, but to do it in a way that will lead others to join you. I talked about this if you had a chance to hear the online brief little teaching that I sent out by email right around noon today. Spoke about that teaching. She had this unbelievable gift of enabling others to be disarmed, to be open to the thinking that they would not otherwise have been open to before, to be willing to accept new ways of being that they had not been willing to accept before. This was her gift. And of course, she wished to inspire all of us to be partners, not just to watch her and hope and pray that she would pull it off again, but instead to see us not in a moment of deflation, but instead in a moment of claiming responsibility. One of the great things that she said was that real change, enduring change, these are Ruth Bader Ginsburg's words, real change, enduring change happens one step at a time. She knew that it would be difficult. not only in the aftermath of her passing, but in every moment. Difficult to achieve the changes that we seek to make real in our lives, in our world, in our society. She was willing to be patient, willing to understand one step at a time, just as the midrashic character Nachshon, who stepped one foot into the water, hoping that the waters would part. No miracle. Another step, no miracle. Another step, and only when the water was all the way up to his nose, and breathing was hard to come by, did we begin to experience the wonderment of the separation of water. Did we see the change that our people so desperately sought. That is the story of change for the Jewish people, for the American people, for all people. That's how it takes place. Real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. Poet Rosemary Wachtola Tromer wrote this poem about that teaching this week, in the days since Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing. And so, because it is the Michamocha, these words of poetry for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So let me take one step right now, one step toward respect, and give me strength to take another toward clarity. And though my feet might feel like stones, let me take another step toward justice, and another toward equity, and another toward truth. And though my legs may feel leaden and slow, though someone else may step on my toes, may I inch toward forgiveness. May every step be toward a bridge. Enough divisiveness. And as I go, may I find joy in the stepping, grace in the edging toward great change. But if there is little joy, let me step anyway, and then take another step, and another, and another. We walk toward the uncertainty, being fenced in by a great sea, having a hard time picturing how we make it to the other side. I'm feeling that way. I know you are too. But the sea does part, one step, one breath at a time. She showed us how. We can do it. Continue living this metaphor of our people, of our lives. Page 40.
We continue with the Amidah on page 48.
Mouth
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim Vekonei Hakol Vezocher Hasdei Avot Ve'imahot Umevi Geula Livnei Bneihem Lema'an Shemo Be'ava Zochreinu L'chaim Na'lachafet Ha'chaim V'chotbeinu B'sefer ha'chaim L'man ha'Elohim ha'im Chotbeinu B'sefer ha'chaim L'man ha'Elohim ha'im Melech Ozer u'Moshia u'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham Bezrat Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayeh HaKol atah Rav leHoshia Morid Hatal Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed Mechayeh HaKol Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Verofeh Cholim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Michamocha Bal Gevurot Umido Melech Melech Memit Machayeh Umatzmiach Yeshua Michamocha L'chayot hakol Baruch atah Adonai Mechayeh hakol Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh u'goroshim b'chol yom Yehalelucha selah Baruch atah Adonai HaMelech HaKadosh. You may continue silently on your own until page 62, and when you are completed, you can be seated or remain standing.
say shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Oh, say shalom, shalom biroma. Oh, yeah, say shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Oh, yeah, say shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, amen. Oh, say shalom, shalom biroma. We are say shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Ve'al kol Yisrael
Tonight we have a precious opportunity that many of you have come to be with us tonight especially for. This is the 22nd consecutive year that Richard Marks has brought us the Torah of his heart and his life on Shabbat Shuvah. He started doing this just a couple of years before I first came to Leobeck Temple, and I heard about this special custom that had been developed for just a few years with Richard, who at that time was a member of the Board of Trustees of Leobeck Temple. And I approached him. We didn't really know each other very well yet at that time, and I said, is this something that you'd be open to continuing doing? I'd love to experience one of your midrashim, one of your lifting up of the story of Moses and making it your own and then our own. He said, sure. Next thing I know, we are here now 18 years into our sharing this Shabbat Shuvah together. And Richard has really kind of done everything under the sun for our congregation. He's been a participant in almost everything that has been at the heart of our community. He's been a leader of our community, a trustee of our community, an honoree of our community, and most of all, for all of us tonight, a teacher of Torah for our community. It is my great, great pleasure to welcome once again to our virtual Bima this year, for all of you, for all of us to learn from and to be blessed by, Richard Marks.
Shabbat Shalom. 50 years ago, at Kent State, Ohio National Guardsmen fired into a crowd, killing 4 unarmed students protesting against the Vietnam War. A few weeks later, a much younger me, wearing no cap, no gown, black armband, commenced my UCLA valedictory address saying, "The time is out of joint. The world has broken upon us. The war continues and students are murdered for dissenting. The conscience of America must be taken to the streets to end this despised war of old men's pride and young men's lives and to regain our inalienable rights." I've lightened up a lot since then, and I'm older now than the prideful men who prosecuted that war. But 50 years later, I'm still preaching the same sermon because the world is still broken. The time is still out of joint. we're still in the dark, not seeing how precariously we're balanced, how much we need each other. With our end just a breath away, we're still divided, still programmed to see differences separating us before similarities uniting us. But we can choose how we wrestle with our demons. When there was something rotten in Denmark, Shakespeare's Hamlet bitterly decried, "The time is out of joint, O cursed spite, that ever I was born to set it right," which led to a stage littered with dead bodies. But there's another path, the one less traveled. When King George would not let his people go, when those times were out of joint, Lin-Manuel, our hip-hop bard, imagined the Schuyler sisters leaning in and declaring, "How lucky we are to be alive right now." That path likewise led to a landscape littered with dead bodies, but also to the beginning of our journey to create a more perfect union. And knowing that we are out of joint, from their graves, our Jewish sages command us to always remember our oneness. Teach our children that God dwells within us as us, and do not unto anyone what is hateful to us. Simple lessons from our ancient Torah we still need to learn. As John Lewis said from his grave, humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching struggle for a long time. That is why the answers worked out long ago can help us find solutions to the challenges of our times. And although we always have the choice to seek those solutions alone or with others, knowing that internal battles are fought alone, our sages command us to seek the answers worked out long ago in community, to study the lessons of Torah together. Our sages also knew that it doesn't matter where we study Torah. We don't call our temple the house of God. We call it the house of gathering, because we gather wherever we can, even virtually, to remind each other of who we are, who we want to be, and who we don't want to be. Almost 35 years ago, Nancy and I joined this community of values for the children we wanted to raise. And we learned the value of a multi-generational community, from babies to bubbies. In 1999, I religiously attended weekly services to say Kaddish for my father. That year, listening to our story in its weekly portions from In the Beginning to the death of Moses, hearing congregants share their stories, bearing witness to LBT's cycle of life, this community became family. And 21 years ago, I chose to write a hopeful story about the death of Moses. This week's Torah portion, and it was my bar mitzvah Torah portion. Every year since, I say it's my last, but I'm still here choosing hope over fear. Moses says goodbye, climbs Mount Nebo, sees the promised land, and dies. But since the Torah has few details in our tradition of Midrash, I'm imagining Moses remembering his life while climbing Mount Nebo to his death. Moses escapes Pharaoh's genocide of the slaves' baby boys because his mother sets him adrift in the Nile to be rescued and adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. But I imagine seeing his family enslaved while he lives in luxury leaves Moses shell-shocked. One day he explodes, kills an overseer flogging a slave, and flees to the desert. You know the rest. We read it every year. burning bush, let my people go, plagues, Red Sea, and Sinai. But when the Torah is revealed, Moses knows that he will lead the freed slaves in the wilderness until today, the day he dies. And although I imagine for years Moses begs God to pass the torch to the next generation, to let Moses play a supporting role, God refuses. Yes, Moses' time was out of joint. His internal pendulum swung from cursed spite to how lucky he was to have been born to try to set it right. But how did he cope with the stress of being a beneficiary of slave labor? Well, I imagine Pharaoh's daughter tells Moses stories about a time when he won't have to hide his Hebrew birth, and teaches him to swim before he can walk. Each night in Egypt, Moses returns to the Nile, trying to release the stress of another day in Pharaoh's inner circle by swimming. One stroke, one breath at a time, those nightly baptisms become his sanctuary, always shifting his perspective from spite to light. But in the wilderness, without his nightly Nile swims, how does Moses deal with his demons? Well, being part of a community helps put his life into perspective. But I imagine each night Moses finds the spring at the nearest oasis, ties one end of a rope around a palm tree at the water's edge, the other end around his waist. And at the end of his metaphoric and actual rope, Moses swims in place until his internal dialogue fades and Moses remembers how lucky he's been. In this week's Torah portion, after 40 years of burying the slave generation and raising the next, Moses delivers his farewell address. I imagine Moses wants to bridge the gap between his generation, who knew firsthand the cruelty of Pharaoh and slavery, and the next generation who knew Pharaoh and slavery only from stories. But in the Torah, Moses delivers the farewell dictated by a spiteful God, an indictment of the Israelites' sins, and a prophecy of their punishments with no real hope of redemption. I imagine Moses finishes, climbs Mount Nebo regretting not having delivered his hopeful farewell. At the summit, glad to pass the torch, but sad to no longer be able to help. I imagine God kisses Moses, drawing out his last breath of life. Moses has been afraid that death would feel like drowning, like being unable to breathe. But Moses feels buoyant, as if he's swimming through time and space. He sees the new generation enter the promised land and all the generations to follow. Washington become the first leader to teach pharaohs and prophets how to say goodbye. And Dr. King's long arc of the moral universe slowly bending towards justice. And then Moses is swimming in the Nile, his first refuge, with everyone he's ever known and loved, all free to breathe in life and death. For Moses, the time is no longer out of joint, and knowing he did his part to set it right, one breath, one stroke at a time, Moses is finally at peace. But in a world perpetually out of joint, how do we creatures of habit cope? Well, I seek out hopeful stories. I'm told that my first words were read me. My parents would read me a story, and I'd say, read me again and again and again. And I'll never forget the ache in my teenage soul reading Victor Hugo's story about the plight of Jean Valjean. My parents also taught me to swim before I could walk, and ever since, swimming has been my refuge, always shifting my perspective. The longer the swim, the bigger the shift. You may not know it, but the greatest marathon swimmer of the 20th century was an Egyptian who trained in the Nile. Years ago, when I needed to return to my Nile to shift my perspective, I chose to wrestle with my mind sharks by swimming the Catalina Channel. And during that dark night, my mantra was that Egyptian swimmer's name, Abu Hif, Abu Hif, Abu Hif. 6 months ago, public pools closed and I could no longer swim with my master's team. I felt cursed spite. But Nancy bought me a swimming tether, a bungee cord attached to a belt, and dear friends Dev and David allowed me to use their small backyard pool. Almost every day since, air quality permitting, I put on the belt, tie the cord to a pole outside their pool, and swim in place until my internal dialogue fades and I remember how lucky I am. But these last 6 months have been a cruel struggle for everyone, especially for communities in quarantine. 2020 was the first Rosh Hashanah we were not physically together to hear our shofar call us to take arms against a sea of troubles. But during this pandemic, virtually connecting with LBT has helped put my life into perspective. Herschel Goldhirsch was born in Eastern Europe in 1902. His parents immigrated to America in 1904. And Herschel grew up on Manhattan's Lower East Side as Harry Golden. He became a stockbroker, lost everything in the crash of '29, moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and reinvented himself as a writer fighting racial segregation with humor. Growing up, I read Golden's stories, and Harry's light insights have been with me ever since. Take his vertical Negro plan involving removing chairs from to-be-integrated buildings because whites didn't mind standing with Negroes at, say, bank tellers' windows, only sitting with them. And knowing that our brains are mainly water, Harry persuaded a store owner to put an out-of-order sign over the white drinking fountain. Slowly, whites began drinking from the colored fountain, and by the end of the third week, everybody was drinking segregated water. A year before I gave my UCLA valedictory address, as chairman of the Student Speakers Program, I invited speakers sensitive to the time to UCLA, all who are much younger than I am today, to share their stories. Speakers such as Eldridge Cleaver, the original Black Panther. Alex Haley, who shared about tracing his roots back to Africa before he wrote that book. Yitzhak Rabin, the architect of Israel's Six-Day War victory. And Harry Golden, who said, "I am both an American and a Jew, each to the enrichment of the other." A perfect description of our LBT community. A year ago, in my Shabbat Shuvah Midrash, trying to explain why I, a non-religious Jew, belong to a religious community, I turned to Harry, and I repeated the question he asked his father. "Papa, if you don't believe in God, why do you go to shul?" Golden's father's answer: "My friend Garfinkel goes to talk to God. I go to talk to Garfinkel." My answer: "You may go to talk to God. I go to talk to you." A few days later, last Yom Kippur, maybe proving that there is a God, the very first sentence in the very first essay in our very new prayer book repeated the Garfinkel and Golden story I had shared only a few days before. But the author of the essay said, Garfinkel and Golden's different reasons for going to temple might be wrong. Maybe they went for the same reason. Because our tradition says when we authentically meet another person, we also meet God. To paraphrase Victor Hugo, to meet another person is to see the face of God. I am grateful we met and you chose to share your stories with me. And humbled, you let me share mine with you. When I joined this temple, I knew no one on the yahrzeit list. Now there's not a week when I don't. And someday I will be added. Yes, I'm an LBT OG, old geezer, passing the torch, but still trying to do my part. That's the power of a multi-generational community. Yes, our time is out of joint, but knowing the obstacles, knowing our fears, we have still chosen a community dedicated to healing our world, one broken soul at a time, with kind and compassionate actions, a community choosing to see how lucky we are to be alive right now. The killings at Kent State led to the passage of the 26th Amendment, lowering the voting age from 21 to 18, and then to the end of the Vietnam War. My generation did not throw away our shot. There has been progress in the last 50 years. But because the arc of the moral universe bends slowly, because there's still so much left to do, I'm still preaching the same sermon while watching the next generation take their shot and continue our struggle. 50 years ago, my younger self chose to conclude my UCLA valedictory address on a hopeful note. Our generation is supported by the dreams of our parents. Our children will be supported by ours. And we must declare that reconciliation is possible. For a belief in the possible is our strength, a belief that refuses no one and offers no shelter to the hypocrisies of life that make us less. My immigrant grandfather asked me to do one thing religiously: vote. And I have. 4 years ago, I concluded my midrash saying, a woman will follow a black president, and God laughed. 4 years later, swimming upstream against a sea of troubles, I'll conclude saying, we will elect our first woman vice president, whose second gentleman will be a Jewish entertainment attorney like me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehachianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed be some unknowable force that has given us life, sustained us, and revealed to us how lucky we are to be alive right now, choosing to gather virtually together. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom to you, Richard, and just the deepest thanks for that beautiful, deep, rich Torah. Reconciliation is possible. So too is growth and healing for each of us as individuals and for all of us as a human family. Beautiful Torah, thank you. As always, thank you. Reconciliation possible. Healing possible. It's the reason we join together in these words of prayer found in the middle of page 253. Words that we offer as our way of reaching out to God and to one another, which may well be the same thing as Richard taught us. To reach for refuat haguf, recovery of broken bodies, and refuat nefesh, a healing of broken spirits. Let us all experience that type of growth Let us wish that type of recovery to those who need it most. Before we join together in singing, I invite you to speak aloud the names of all those who you would like to include in our collective prayer for healing on this Shabbat evening. מקור הברכה לאמותינו. May the source of strength who blessed the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. Let us sing, Amen. Sheberach Yimotenu Bekor Habracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, renewal of body, renewal of spirit, and let us sing.
We continue with the Aleinu at the bottom of page 282. If you're able, please rise. Aleinu l'shabeach Adon hakol, latet gedula leotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo samanu kemishpacha adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamon. אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר ואדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ושמו אחד ושמו אחד.
Some words to help us prepare for reciting Kaddish tonight, words not found in the prayer book. They're wrong, the scientists. The universe wasn't created billions of years ago. The universe is created every day. The scientists are wrong to claim the universe was created from one primordial substance. The world is created every day from various substances with nothing in common. Only the relative proportions of their masses, like the elements of sorrow and hope, make them companions and curbstones. I'm sorry, I have to get up in all modesty and disagree with what is so sure and recognized by experts, that there is no speed faster than the speed of light. When I and my lighted flesh just noticed something else right here, whose speed is even greater than the speed of light, and which also returns, though not in a straight line, because of the curve of the universe, or because of the innocence of God. And if we connect all this to an equation, according to the rules, maybe it will make sense that I refuse to believe that her voice, his voice, and everything I always cherished, and everything so real and suddenly lost, is actually lost forever. As we prepare to recite Kaddish prayer this evening, we remember especially Herman Pillars, husband of Judith Pillars and father of Jonathan and Heidi; James Bardis, father of David Bardis, father-in-law of Deborah Cantor and grandfather of Henry and Eleanor; Seymour Gantman, brother of Mort Gantman and brother-in-law of Isla Groby; and Gail Smiler Steinberg, sister of Nancy Levinson and Maureen Mellick, whom death has taken from us in recent days. And we link their names with Jean Alperslan Azur, Bernard Brickman, Ben Burke, Lila Cohen, Rochelle Cohen, Lena Deitch, Morris Dinkin, Martha Friedman, Mordecai Gerstein, Martin Gluckstern, Ida Goldstein, Tom Gould, Irving Green, Marilyn Halpin, Alvin Hittner, Hilda Hoffman, J. Howard Karp, Flynn Kirschenbaum, David Koslow, Emil Crew, Rosemary Stein Lazarus, Betsy Lesser, Seymour Levine, Aaron Kintu Moses, Elaine Rafton, Albert B. Rubin, Edward Rubin, Ronald Russell, Charlotte Littman Schneider, Selma S. Stein, Naoma Sterling, Ethel Wilson, Dakota Ziff. If there are others to include, please speak their names aloud. We say Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the memory of the righteous is an everlasting blessing, as together we give thanks for the blessing of life, with the words of Mourner's Kaddish, found in the online prayer book on page 294. If you're able, please rise at this time. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ve'almad yivrach ilutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv imru, amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lamei almaya. Yibarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitanal, shemei dekudsha b'richu. Ve'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, amen. The giver of peace, send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved among us, and let us together say, Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
As Richard said, I go to see Golden, Harry Golden. I can't wait to be with all of you Sunday night and Monday in our community. But for now, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.
I want to thank Richard. Richard, thank you once again. My gosh. There are multiple reasons why you've been doing this for 22 years, and please God, on to 23 and many more. Part of it is because you have taken this opportunity and made it your own and felt committed to continuing. But a big part of it is because I really don't think our congregation would tolerate your stopping. And so I just want to say thank you once again for the beauty of what you brought to us, a celebration of the gift of this community, especially at this time where we are feeling each other's physical absence, but are still deeply warmed, moved, and inspired by the gift of one another's presence. That's something that we're able to create from home to home. You helped us to see that and celebrate it with great beauty and vision tonight. And of course, the message that you brought to us will enrich these holy days deeply. So many thanks. And as my own words of thanks and blessing for all of you to conclude tonight, Shabbat Shuvah, the Shabbat of turning, the Shabbat of change. Let us remember what our wise sage in our time taught us. Real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. This week, these days, this season, take a step, and another, and another. Shabbat Shalom.